I'm going to keep it 100 with y'all. I'm going to tell y'all this on record right now. I believe that this is not going to be a walk in the park for Keyshawn Davis. I believe that. I'm not saying he's not going to win. I'm not even saying he's going to win. I'm just starting the foundation off with this. He's going to be in the ring with a fighter who can fight. Nahir Albright can fight. I know that people counting him out right now. I know the betting odds are not favoring him to win this fight. I know that people are caught up into the hype that is surrounding Keyshawn Davis. He's with a major network. He's signed to a major promoter. I get all of that. But Nahir Albright is not going to lay down for Keyshawn Davis. In fact, I think he's going to give Keyshawn his toughest challenge. Now, I'm going to also say this too, because I'm a realist. I believe in being fair and keeping it all the way 100, keeping it all the way honest, keeping it all the way 1,000, keeping it all the way a stack, keeping it all the way a thou wow. However you slice it, I always like to make sure I'm being realistic in my perspective. With that being said, Nahir Albright, okay, he is coming off of a little layoff when you compare his resume in the last year or two to Keyshawn Davis. And what I mean by that is he's only had 2 fights in the last, what, year and a half or somewhere around there? Where Keyshawn, he done fought about 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years. Matter of fact, in the last year and a half, I think he had 3 fights already. And I'm talking about one fight, and then 90 days later, another fight, and then about 90 days later, another fight. So he's been very active, is basically the point that I'm making. He's been extremely active. So that's going to count for something, particularly in this fight, which is why Nahir Albright was chosen. I want y'all to understand how the business of boxing works. So that's why I got to give my perspective. When you look at a fighter, an up-and-coming prospect, such as a Keyshawn, who's coming in the ring, done fought 3 or 4 times in the last year and a half to 2 years. And he's moving up in the ranking system. And of course, he has 9 wins, 0 losses. He's undefeated. And 6 of those 9 wins have come by way of knockout. When you got a fighter that you're bringing up as a manager, as a promoter, that's in the position of Keyshawn Davis, it's very customary and typical to find fighters that can get into the ring, that can keep him honest enough as he's still on the job training, okay, because he's still green in the business. And so someone like a Nahir Albright, who has a total of 2 fights in probably the last year and a half, this is one of those factors that will be beneficial for Davis, okay, because of the inactivity. And I'm talking about comparing the 2 fighters when I say inactivity. So when you have a fighter that's inactive, compared to Keyshawn, he or she is already coming into the ring at a disadvantage. See, it's all about making the prospect, the ace side, look good. Okay? That's what it's all about. It's nothing personal. It's just business. But I think that if Nahir Albright, who looked good in his last fight, he fought a masterpiece in his last fight. If he can come and shake a little bit of that ring rust off in the early rounds, okay? Because I believe this is a 10-rounder, if I'm not mistaken. Keyshawn and Nahir, they're going to fight in the 10-rounder, if I'm not mistaken. Okay? Now, understand something now. We haven't seen Keyshawn in there with somebody that can give him a little bit more work. Now, he has went the distance 3 times in his professional career. You can see how, the promoter is moving him up, building him up. He's early in the game with it. Okay? So he's been looking good. And we take our hat off to Keyshawn Davis. But what I'm saying is if Nahir Albright can show up tomorrow and shake a little bit of that ring rust off in the early rounds, this might be a competitive fight. In fact, I believe this may be a more competitive fight than what is being advertised. Nahir Albright, he's not from my city. He's really from Jersey. But you know him, his brother. You know he got a good family. You know, and you got to understand something. He's come from a fighting family, so fighting is in his blood. We cannot count the young man out because he can fight. This is not no, oh, he's just going to get in there and lay down. This is not one of those. Nahir Albright's not one of them. Okay, I've seen this young man fight numerous times. In fact, if you go back into your memory bank, he did a phenomenal job in his first time competing. I believe he fought on Showtime, if I'm not mistaken. I think he fought on Showtime. This was like what, 2 years ago? A year and a half or 2 years ago? I think it was. He fought on Showtime. Now, of course, he was fighting an undefeated fighter who was a power puncher. But guess what? He went in there. He looked good. He didn't come up with the win, but Nahir Albright looked good in that fight. And what I'm saying to each and every last one of y'all listening to me live and living color, do not count Nahir Albright out. Okay? He's going to put up a good fight against Keyshawn. And he has more professional experience than Keyshawn. Now, understand something now. When you look at fighters who have, let's say, 10, let's use the average of 10 fights, 10 professional fights. And they're not accustomed to going the distance, or they're not accustomed to competing after a certain amount of rounds. You have to make sure that you give the edge in the advantage column to a fighter like a Nahir Albright. We talked about it just now. 9 fights, 6 of those wins, those 9 wins of Keyshawn have come by way of knockout. So he hasn't went the distance in most of his fights. Well, he's in there with a guy who's durable, who is accustomed to going the distance, and Nahir Albright. Now, Nahir Albright don't have, crazy knockout power, whereas though a lot of people, like fans, want to see like knockouts all the time. Spectacular knockouts is what I'm saying. But when you have a fighter like Nahir Albright who can box, who's durable, who has the mentality of winning, who's not going to lay down, who looked impressive in his last fight, and who's used to going the distance, it's a possibility if he shake that ring rust off in the early rounds, he can take Keyshawn to deep waters. And we can get a more competitive 10-rounder. All right? So all I'm saying is don't count Nahir Albright out. And don't think just because he's coming in with the inactivity compared to Keyshawn that he's just going to go in there and get knocked out. Don't think that. Give the young man a chance. This is boxing. But on the flip side of that coin, we can't be naive either. Keyshawn Davis is a knockout artist. At least that's what he is being advertised as. So we got to support both fighters in this. Salute to everybody that's acknowledging me in the chat. I see you. BBO Boxing is in the chat. I always try to recognize and acknowledge other content creators who come on over and come into the chat. And so salute to my guy, BBO Boxing. Yeah, so don't count Nahir Albright out. Young man from Jersey, he can fight. Don't count him out. He's from a fighting family. His brother fights. I like how these guys fight. His cousin, family, his sister, professional wrestler, they can rumble. So we cannot just say just because Keyshawn Davis be knocking people out, he just goes going there and knock Nahir out. We got to give Nahir Albright an opportunity.